Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Happy New Year. Happy new semester for those of you who are taking classes. First environment cluster event of the year. Actually, first cluster event of the new year. Pretty exciting. Really excited about this one. This is an awesome opportunity to connect with somebody who I've been in touch with for a very long time. I met Cameron digitally, I believe, the first time a decade ago when I was thinking of doing a master's at the University of Sussex. And he had just finished his, and I called him up out of the blue and said, hey, would you recommend this program? And he gave me a pretty glowing review. So I ended up going to the UK and doing my master's. Since then, we've sort of connected on and off over the years as our careers have gone in different places. He went to the Government of Alberta, where he became the Director of Public Project Management of the Public Agency Secretariat. I sort of followed in his footsteps. I went to Ottawa, so we sort of wove back and forth. Now, Cam has started what I think is his most ambitious project yet. He's the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Flash Forest, which is an incredible new startup that I've been watching ever since it first showed up on my social media feeds. And just to top it off, he's also doing a Master of Law at the University of Toronto. So for all the overachievers in the room, this is the peak overachiever, I think. Flash Forest has been featured in a huge number of places: CNN, Forbes, CBC, National Geographic, just to name a few, and have won a whole bunch of international awards and recognition. I can't wait to hear more about Cam, his journey, and Flash Forest, and his experience in starting such an incredible company. Cameron Jones, please.
All right, thank you so much for that introduction. We're just first time hanging out, and I'm very glad we stayed in touch all of those years. So my name is Cameron Jones. As Burgess mentioned, I am the co-founder and chief operating officer of Flash Forest. I really like to keep these presentations engaging and very conversational. So I'm going to go through the deck, but I'm definitely not going to take all the time for that because I want to leave some room for questions. I think that's the most important part. So I'm going to start with this slide. This is a real newspaper clipping, and that's actually an image of my backyard in Kelowna. So in 2003, we moved to Kelowna, and later that summer, a wildfire came and it destroyed the whole forest behind our backyard. It was the first, and actually the first wildfire in the Okanagan Mountain Park of anything close to that size. And on that street, there was so much kind of chaos and pandemonium. This is actually a newspaper clipping that's a recording of one of the firefighters on our street telling the rest of his colleagues, I'm going to die. And after that event, we kind of watched how they suppressed the fire, and we waited for it to come back. And we all kind of expected there would be a lot of natural regeneration. Forest would be back in our backyard where we used to toboggan and build tree houses. And unfortunately, this is a picture 20 years later. This is what the forest looks like. So it didn't come back. In fact, it was basically just overtaken by brush, grass, and fireweed. Okanagan is a very dry climate. And what we learned is that the fire burns so hot, there's no cones left on the trees. This is actually a very new phenomenon that's happening with climate change now. These very, very hot, high severity burns end up extinguishing the seedbed, so that that fire doesn't regenerate. Also, it's so big that there's no buffer area for seeds to get transported in by, birds and other animals that might swallow and help kind of fertilize and lay that seed down. And so that's my backyard in Kelowna now. And so I'm going to go into a little bit my career, but this is important because it just gives a little bit of context on where this idea kind of started incubating. I wasn't even fully conscious of it, but it made an impression. So my journey, I got my undergraduate degree at Quest University, which is a liberal arts and sciences university. It's a very hands-on school. They wanted to give you a lot of field experience, which is what appealed to me with it. And I focused on monitoring and evaluation and international development. So after that, I went to Zambia 3 times. I worked with a Train the Trainers program that was trying to train and upskill a lot of medical professionals and did monitoring and evaluation for them. Then I was living and working for an NGO, a nonprofit in Victoria, not able to make rent. We were living without heat because we had a big oil furnace and we were scraping by. But I mean, I was passionate about it, but over the year, I just realized, you know, my real passion is climate change. And I wanted to do something on climate change. So, as Burgess mentioned, I decided to quit that job and I moved to England and I did a Master's of Science on Sustainable Energy Policy. Focus of that was carbon capture and storage. And it was a great year. I mean, one thing that I think was really kind of noteworthy of it is that when I first arrived at the school, there was the head of the SPRU department, or Science Policy Research Unit. His name was Jim Watson, and he wrote all these papers on carbon capture and storage. But no one was able to actually kind of study under him. He was the director of the unit, so it was very difficult to get in touch with him. And I remember sitting in my room, and I was taking the program, and I was like, this is the guy that I came here to talk with. So I just walked up, no appointment, and I just knocked on his door. And he let me in. I think he was a little surprised, taken aback. And I was very bored, sat down, we chatted, we kept a relationship throughout the year. I ended up being the only student in the cohort that actually did my dissertation under him, and he helped me publish a book on carbon capture and storage technology, which was just, it was great for my career. It really was kind of a launch pad, and what it taught me is that it's not who you know, it's who you make yourself known to. And so this is something that's going to be kind of a recurring theme. So after I finished and graduated from that program, I ended up moving to Alberta, where I was working for the Department of Energy, started as a policy analyst, and kind of put my hand up for everything. I was always trying to get as many opportunities as I could. And I remember sitting at my desk and I saw this position open up for a manager role in the Deputy Minister's office. And that was about 5 steps ahead of where I was. It's very tiered in government. I was a PS1, or policy analyst 1. This was an M1 position. And I just remember sitting there and saying, it's not who you know, it's who you make yourself known to. So I walked up to the Deputy Minister's office, went to the Chief of Staff's door, no appointment, just knocked on it, sat down, started chatting with him. And a week later, I got the job. He said, no one else did that. And it was a great career jump for me. And then I also got experience as an acting Chief of Staff, where whenever he was gone, I took that Chief of Staff role and would fill it. And I did that on multiple occasions, took a director position. And once I took that director position, I ended up in a place called Public Agency Secretariat as a director of project management. It's basically HR. You're managing the HR unit. And at that point, I realized I made a number of compromises in my career. I started with a strong focus on climate change, but then as kind of different career opportunities opened up for me, I started taking those and kind of putting on the back burner this passion for climate change. And the year in that role, I was deeply unhappy. So I quit. And it's kind of rare to quit government too. Burgess knows we get a lot of naysayers saying, hey, you got a pension, you're going to say goodbye to your pension, you only got to ride out another 20 years and you can retire. But that filled me with anxiety. The thought that I am in the same job, in the same institution I'll be for the rest of my life. So I quit that and I started with a tiny little startup in Toronto, trying to teach courses on corporate social responsibility and renewable energy technology. Again, what I learned very fast is this startup didn't have clients yet. In fact, I had to build the curriculum, and then I had to go out and make sales calls and actually try to sell it. And again, it's not who you know, it's who you make yourself known to. Pick up the phone, and I just started calling schools, calling directors of different kind of certificate programs, continuing education programs. We got into the U of A, so I taught there. I ended up teaching at Dalhousie. But again, it's dissatisfied because there was something in my head. I had a passion, and it just wasn't a perfect merger yet. It was close. I was tangentially involved. I was working on climate change. I was teaching about climate change, but I wasn't really feeling impact. And so my brother had this idea for a company where we could do something tangible, use drones to plant trees. Immediately, I was like, that's brilliant. What a great idea. And so quit that job and went all in on Flash Forest, didn't get paid a cent for the first year, bankrolled everything, went into debt. And while I was there, while I was studying Flash Forest, and even just this year, I still wanted to continue my education. I still wanted to continuously develop. So I decided to enroll at the U of T in their GPLLM, or it's a Master's of Law program with a focus on tech and innovation, which is quite similar to what I'm doing now. So let's talk about why I started Flash Forest. In 2023, I think a lot of you would have seen the headlines about the wildfires that happened in Canada. New York City was drenched in smoke from Canadian forests. So in 2023, we lost about 16.5 million hectares of forest. And one pet peeve I have with DEX is you get these numbers and it sounds kind of impressive, but you can't put it into context. So I'll read the context. That's the land area of Lake Huron, Lake Ontario, and all of Lake Superior is forest that's gone. And that's just in 1 year alone. And as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of these fires don't regenerate. They come back as brush grass, they come back as fireweed. We constantly get called. So this is all I could think of myself actually focusing on. Flash forward, doing something where I'm actually trying to make an impact. So let's talk about the journey a little bit, how a startup starts. So basically, you've got to have an idea. You want to incubate an idea. You need to think, what's your innovation? What's new that you're going to bring to the table? You want to test that. You want to make sure that there's a desire in the market for that idea. It might sound great to you, but if no one wants to buy it, it is not going to bear a lot of fruit. Once you test it, that there's interest in the market, you need to test the product in the field. Not a literal field, whatever your field is, you want to just make sure that you're doing rigorous testing, stress testing. You want to make sure that your product actually works. Then you should plan out a business. Come up with a roadmap where you want to kind of evolve the business over multiple years, what you're going to do with any of the financial capital that you bring into the business, any investments, how it's going to be spent to grow the company, to fund R&D, and then you want to get into revenue generation. Now these last two, fundraising and revenue generation, a lot will flip this. They're not necessarily in that order. I mean, a lot of people argue you want to have revenue first. As a climate tech company, it's pretty capital intensive, which means we have to spend a lot of money on equipment. So when we started Flash Forest, we had savings, but we blew through it, spent about $45,000 trying to get the drones, trying to make stuff in our little apartments, our little shoebox apartments in Toronto. And so we realized we need to fundraise to do this market. So pretty clear process. In reality, it's a lot closer to this. You scramble. You start with an idea, then you move straight into trying to test that idea in the field. You get some preliminary results, get your ego boosted a little bit. You're like, I'm going to go and fundraise for this, start fundraising. Actually, maybe I should have come up with a business plan. And then, oh, shoot, we actually got to make sure that there's interest in the market for this. So you go back and start doing some market testing. You do this multiple times before you ever get into revenue generation. So humbling for us, and you're going to see that's kind of a theme here. What we ended up doing in our first years, we launched a Kickstarter. So we had our idea, we went on Kickstarter, we made a really, really nice kind of flashy video. I'm nervous to click on another link just because of the issues with this, but I have a link here to our original Kickstarter. And we set a goal, we needed to raise $10,000 in the first day. Once you do that, Kickstarter features you. And then you get a lot more interest. So we canvassed friends, we wrote to Good News Network, we're like, hey, we're going to launch this thing. They put out a story. First day, we raised $11,000. After about a month, Kickstarter put us front page, their favorite campaign on Kickstarter, and we ended up raising $108,000. So we were over the moon. We were so excited. We're like, hey, this is it. We're all in. What we hadn't done is market testing and field testing. While the video was flashy, it actually ended up not being very successful in the field. And I'll talk about how that worked, but this is a picture of us right after we launched the Kickstarter campaign. First 5 employees, all of us unpaid. But we just started going straight into business planning after we had our idea and we thought we got market validation. Once we kind of did that business planning, we said, okay, now we're going to go and test this in the field. We're going to see if this actually works. We were super confident that it would. And these are three kind of guiding kind of principles that we had, still have to this day. And I think this is what really was the most important factor. I know myself, I'm an ideas guy. I'm always thinking about ideas. This is actually the third startup idea I've had two before that, which we can maybe talk about later. But my issue was really making the leap, making the investment, the time and financial investment, because it becomes very real. But with this one, I wasn't okay with myself doing that. So the first thing I thought was, no decision is in itself a decision. So we had all of this momentum, but to actually take off and go on the road for 2.5 months to try to plant in the field, that was a big commitment. And I was sitting and delaying, maybe this year, maybe next year. And me sitting and delaying, I was making a decision to effectively not do it. So I said, no decision is a decision, and I'm going to make the decision to go. There's no success without risk as well. There's a lot of risk built into this. There still is risk. Lots of it. But you're not going to be successful if you're not taking on a degree of risk. We took on a lot of risk, and you need to have an appetite for it. You need to be able to kind of palate that risk, because that's the only way you're going to be successful. You're going to try to change something. And the third one, I say this is the most important. What it comes down to when I recruit everyone who's on our team, is the most important thing for anyone trying to start a company, and it's that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. You can sit across the table from people that are a lot smarter than you, but if they're not hardworking, it doesn't matter. You work hard enough, you can figure anything out, and that's with our team. Trust me, we have learned so much in this business, and it's all just because of the relentless hours we were willing to put in. If we came up against a roadblock, if we came up against a failure, and we come up against many, just keep in mind, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. You work hard enough, you will get that talent. But that is the most important piece. You just got to be able and willing to put in the hours. So we went out. We were excited. We were all jacked up. We drove, slept in the truck, swam in lakes, drove across Canada from Ontario to northwest British Columbia. And one of the things that happened was we realized our friends ended up going back and doing assessments on our Kickstarter campaign. This was the first video that went viral. This is a little snippet of it. You can't really see, but there's a drone there next to that tree. This is where we were firing our pods. That didn't work. One of the things we learned very fast, you can't plant in grass. Planting grass, it's going to starve that seedling of oxygen. It's going to starve it of water. It's going to be outcompeted, and none of it worked. Okay, so that's enough. Shoot, we just wanted to do this, and that was a failure. Very first flight, keep in mind, we have not had a hotel, slept in our truck for about 7 days. We had tires blow out, swapped out the tires, maybe even 100 kilometers before we got there, we had another tire blow out. We finally get to the site, and we know, okay, we got a big day. We got a drone, we got a pod, we're gonna go out, we're gonna plant. Fortunately, there's no grass at this site, so it should be good. First flight, drone takes off, and I guess the altitude hadn't really been properly calibrated on the drone, just the destination site. So the drone took off, veered off 10 feet, crashed into a tree. All of the propellers gone, and it was just lying there. Just a bundle of props and a broken drone. We were stretched. The only thing keeping us going at that moment is just that we were so amped up and excited, and all of our enthusiasm just drained immediately. And we had about 30,000 pods to plant at that site. So we sat there, looked at the drone. You can see pictures here. There's no way in hell there was a chance of us repairing these drones, getting it operational. And this was the very first pilot we were going to do. We had multiple other ones that were going to follow. So we spent 16 hours from when we got there until it was dark at night. 16 hours walking around that site, planting everything by hand. We said, hard work beats talent. We're not going to ride on the coattails of success. We haven't had any success yet, so we're going to do it painstakingly by hand. What matters most is that the pods work, not that the drones work. We can figure out the drone. So let's do it. And we did it. This is my trench foot. It's not real trench foot, but you can't really see here. But many, many, many days. We'd have 16-hour stints in the field. My feet don't normally look like that. So you can see the cracks. They just get super soggy and worn. You're getting blisters, but you just push through, because if you believe in it enough and you're willing to put in the work, eventually it will bear fruit. I'll show you some more failures here. So this is us actually as we arrived at that site. There's our trailer, just fixed the tire. This is one of our early employees. This was a kilometer away from the site that we were planting. So not only did the drone crash, we had 30,000 pods that we needed to hike to basically a swamp, a kilometer each way. So we were so tired. Once we got to that site, then we had to painstakingly plant everything by hand. So we just kept each other motivated, heads down, worked on it. Fast forward a year. This is the next season. So we got through that one. And we actually got some good results when we were out there. But we realized, you know what, these pods can be optimized. The pods that we had were pucks, and they rest on the surface. A lot of them dried out, and the seeds got eaten. So we had some breakthroughs that year, which I'll talk about. But the next year, we had a slightly bigger team, went out. Well, we got stuck. We had 2 days, we were stuck about 10 hours in the field. 10 hours where we have a very tight schedule. We get there, there's no one there to help us. And we literally broke all of the equipment we had trying to get out, but we weren't willing to leave any of our equipment there. So we just spent 10 hours that should have been spent planting, working to get the vehicles fixed, get the vehicles running. Then we got to the site. This is what a planting site in a forestry project looks like. It's not an easy block to walk in. This is back-breaking work. And we wanted to do a lot of monitoring and evaluation. So we were hand planting pods, and this is part of the data collection. So we plant by drone. Then we set up plots where we wanted to individually test our pods, different pod recipes, different species by hand, but we didn't have enough support. So I literally canvassed all my friends when we were in Vancouver, and I said, I need you guys to come up unpaid, because I don't have any money, and work with us for 10 hours in the beating sun to help plant these pods. And they did it. They came out and they helped. This is that site, got the drone up, drone started firing, and it worked. So we had a number of knocks, but eventually got the drone up. And just maybe on this grit and resilience. Like, this is such a common theme for us. Really, are you willing to put in the work? Grittiness is it's undeniably the most important quality you can have with anything in life. Whether it's a startup, it's your own career, it's just grit. You got enough grit, you will start to get the rewards. So here's a little bit more. So after we would spend 16 hours in the field, we came back, and then we had to set up everything for the next day. So we'd spend another 4 hours at night, hovered over the computer, trying to come up with maps. There's always challenges, not a single pilot worked the way we thought. And we'd stay up all night, we'd try to plan the next day, and everyone just did it. So this is us after that was about a 16-hour day, and then we were up about 4 hours that night, just setting up everything for the next day. This was us at the end of that project. See that we were quite scruffy. I cut myself out of it here, but biggest spirit I've ever had. But all smiles, because we did it. No one quit. We wanted to quit many times, but we stuck with it. And that's at the very end, everything was worth it. Everything was worth it. This is was my girlfriend, now my wife. She also had to support us, because not only were we planting all of these pods in the field, so I mentioned the first year we did 30,000, second year we did 300,000. We didn't have a big team, didn't have big salaries. A lot of us were still unpaid, and we had to work around the clock. Couldn't afford to bring in other people, so it just meant that sleep was the thing that we lost. And that was us doing a shift from midnight until 8 in the morning. She'd work the next day. she came out and she did it with me, and we swapped. So 24 hours a day, we were making pods painstakingly in this tiny, tiny warehouse that didn't have any heat as well. So that was another thing, we couldn't afford it. So that was one of the things that we were okay living without. So yes, this is another learning that we had in the business. You want, if you have a startup, to reduce the complexity as much as possible. And we overly complicated a lot of the projects that we worked on, and this is just a learning that you need to have firsthand. But I'll talk about this one because this picture, does anyone notice anything interesting about it? On the left? Looks like a bug. So what you see, does it resemble anything else? A helicopter?
Like the lights.
Yeah, those lights. Basically, that's it. That was a paintball gun. And so we ended up developing these pods that we knew we needed to get into the ground. When we had pucks, it was really easy. We could drop them on the surface, but they weren't germinating well enough. Once we had a breakthrough, we ended up designing this pod that when you wet it, it swells up and it holds water onto that seed, and water was the most important resource we couldn't compromise on. But it was very difficult to make this into something that we could fire because it's wet. When you make the pods, they're wet. And we figured out a way to actually make it dry, and then once it gets wet, it swells up. But then we're like, okay, now how do we embed it in the ground? So the first thing is let's use a paintball gun. So we used the paintball gun. At the top, that's a hopper. As we left our warehouse, again, like we're building this, we're always rushing up against a very, very fast and quickly approaching deadline. We thought everything works. Okay, we got a hopper, this can hold 200 pods, and it'll go into the gun worked. But what didn't work was the hose between the hopper and the gun. So if you see, there's this hose wrapped around. As we departed, that night we realized, shoot, these pods actually don't move from the hopper into the gun. So we called the engineers that were still at the warehouse. They just stayed up all night trying to figure out a solution. They basically came up with ways to coil a hose. This hose could hold about 100 pods, and we just wrapped it around the drone and had it in the air. So this was on our website for a while. No one really noticed. We don't use it anymore, but this is how kind of crude our beginning was, and that's natural, but it was also overly complicated. The main thing is we realized when we were in the field, a paintball gun can only fire about 1,000 shots until that air canister's out. Not only that, you need to have compressed air out in the field. So we had generators constantly compressing air and filling these tanks. Once it gets to about 500 shots, it's not shooting at the same velocity, it's going down. There's no scalability. Like we had to land these drones every minute. Shoots 100 pods, comes back, land it, swap it out, comes back. Even if we had a big hopper, we'd have issues with the air canisters. We spent a year. Brought on from Queen's University, a really bright co-op student, Jeffrey Awadobo. He's with us right now, really bright future in the company, and he helped us mechanize a way of firing pods without compressed air, firing it at the exact same velocity. But we were then, instead of being able to fire 1 pod a second, we're now able to fire 15 pods a second, same velocity, no compressed air, and it just runs on battery. Just runs on electronics, whether it's an external battery or on the drone. So that was a breakthrough. But what we needed to do was realize, okay, let's make this stupidly simple. What are all of the parts that can break? Let's try to cut those out. Let's try to make the process as small as possible and the amount of moving parts as few as possible. Really, really important because the simpler it is, the more scalable it is. We spent a year working on this paintball gun, but not asking ourselves the question of, is this scalable? Eventually, we're going to get to a ceiling, and we got to that ceiling really fast. So yeah, basically, the more parts there are, the more there is to break. So after all of this, there are wins. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and this is such an important theme with grit. especially when it comes to climate change. We're working right now in a very volatile environment. We're working with the climate that's changing way faster than we predicted, especially us, because we are boots on the ground in the field. You need to be able to kind of have that light at the top, just to be able to stay focused and to continue working. And we had wins. So after that first year, we put in a big application. We won a grant from Sustainable Development Technology Canada for 1.7 million. And we had very little in our account at that time. We're painstakingly to get this. And then all of a sudden, okay, actually the company's not going to die. Now its future is a little more secure. Then we won another grant in Alberta to help us commercialize in that province for 1.8 million. And now, all of a sudden, not only is the company's future secure, we actually have money that we can invest to scale the business. This is a very interesting story. So this is me and my colleagues in Dubai. We got a call, I guess a month ago. Actually, it wasn't a call, sorry, it was an email. We got an email from the Crown Prince of the Emirates saying, hey, we saw your company and we would like to sponsor a trip for you to come to Dubai and win this prize. And we're like, what is this kind of Nigerian prince scheme? Like, I saw it and I asked my colleagues, like, this is a scam, right? And we sent it to the Government of Alberta because they also had referenced ERA in that email. And I sent it to my colleagues in government. And they're like, yeah, we sent it to IT. Ignore it. It's a scam. Okay, shoot. Went to sleep that night. In the morning, I woke up and I was like, you know what? There's no harm in me. I'm just responding. So I responded, got on the phone. It was the Crown Prince of the Emirates. We did win this prize. And within 5 days, they flew all of us out first class on the Emirati Airlines to Dubai, hosted us there for a week, and we won the World Government's prize in climate tech. So the World Government Summit is one of the biggest summits in the world for political leaders. And when we were there, they had a number of different categories, and they canvassed and they looked at all of these startups across the world independently. We didn't apply for this award, and they just looked and they tried to find something that had a story that they thought, warranted the prize. So we didn't get money out of it, but we got a pretty sweet trip that built a lot of just kind of confidence, excitement in the company. And so the only real lesson here is, first of all, you don't have to ignore all the emails that might look like scams, but more importantly, you're going to have wins, and when you have those wins, relish, because you need that so you can have the grit when you need the grit. And this is a moment where we need grit. Like, so you will have successes, but you're also going to have failures again. It's not once you get through the failures at the beginning, they're done. All the other failures in the future will be muted. It'll be easier than your first few ones. But it's not necessarily true. It's just you got to recognize that what got you through the first few failures is what's going to get you through the other ones. And that's that grit and that mindset that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So we had a brutal year. This is climate change. And we experienced it firsthand. We chose sites that are selected based on how much precipitation they should get in the summer. And with our business, we've done so much modeling, so much analysis in the field, and we figured out, okay, we know the range of precipitation in the summertime that's ideal for our tech. We can't plant everywhere, but we know our niche. We went to sites that were selected because they get a certain number of precipitation in the summer. They didn't get 100 of that amount of rain. It just broke all climate records. We looked at 10-year data. We looked at good years, bad years. What's the median? What's the mean? It dwarfed it. Didn't get 100 of the precipitation that it needed. And there's benefits to it, like of our tech. We realized, okay, actually what happens sometimes in heat domes is a lot of these seeds, even though we hadn't prepared, we weren't aware of it at the time, when there's a heat dome, they actually don't germinate, and they conserve that energy for when the conditions are ideal. And then we had to test that in our greenhouse. And we have to do research on that because that's something that we can also use to our advantage. So we know that there was a heat dome. We know that there was drought, and this could deflate and sink companies. We said, no, we're going to take this, we're going to figure out how to work it to our advantage. And so what we've been working on is how to make sure that seeds that go into our pods when there is a heat dome don't germinate and die. In fact, we make sure that they're preserved. So if the conditions are great, they germinate, and if they're not, stay dormant and then wait until the conditions are okay. But yes, there will be failures in your business. So you need to have the grit and this commitment for that. And again, more wins will come. So we closed a Series A investment round last year. That was $11 million in finance. Very helpful for the business. Really helps us kind of just have the capital we need to not only overcome those challenges, but also to scale the business. And then this is a picture, I took this just 3 days ago. So you can't see the equipment here, but we basically designed a machine. We just implemented it last week. This is a world first. Doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. We invested millions in it. What this does, not only it takes our seed pods and gets seed in them, but it does everything. It gets the seed pods, aligns them and makes sure that they're seeded, they're coated properly. It's got a vision system that makes sure there's no seed waste, because again, we were doing this painstakingly by hand. Took us 17 people working almost 24 hours to do 300,000 pods over 3 months. This machine now does 500,000 pods a day. Without any staff. So that's automation. So we're like, okay, we mechanized it. We just turned it on 2 days ago, and that's the very first pod that's held by my colleague Frank. He's been with us since the very beginning. He designed it. And we brought in other people to help build it. And so now we've got a truly scalable solution. That's automation. We've got 500,000 of these we can do every day. Now we need to figure out what are the other areas that we can automate and mechanize, because that's what the climate requires. Another thing too, you have your successes, you'll have your failures. One thing that I found helped me with grit is just prioritizing my team all the time. You got to prioritize what's important. It'll be different in different companies, but I think the common thread for everyone is it's your people. We wouldn't have anything without the team that we have. And so one thing that the founders of the business have done, even when we had next to nothing in our account, is we did retreats every year where we brought out all of our staff. We had company visas. All of those points didn't go to us traveling to conferences. It came to us being able to fly our staff over to Ontario so we could do a big retreat where we just let our hair down. We have fun. We just love spending time with each other. We get our energy back, so we're ready to go on for another year. Because we know it's going to be a hard year, but we've got to prioritize what's important. So we've been doing that since we had almost nothing in the account to after we closed our A round. So these are pictures of our team at different retreats, and then that's us at the World Government Summit. There. How are we doing for time?
That's time if you want.
So time, I'll try to be a little bit faster here. So I'll just explain a little bit where we are now. We have a little bit of a tech overview. So we're on a mission. We want to plant 1 billion trees by 2028, not 1 billion pods, but trees. And we're trying to do that through every means possible. The main key for us, it's not drones, it's just automation. So we moved even past drones while we use drones for the majority of our work. We've now come up with other tools that can do this in other environments that the drones weren't able to. And so we want to mechanize everything we can because this is what the climate needs. 1 billion trees by 2028 also sounds ambitious, but it's really a drop in the bucket compared to our needs. So there's 16.5 million hectares burned in 2023. A hectare on average is about 1,400, 1,500 trees. So this is a drop in the bucket, but it's the first drop that we need to make sure is there. Our tech, so we've had huge breakthroughs with our pod, but we came up with these seed pods that are truly unique. I've never seen anyone else with anything kind of close to them. I wish I actually had one here, but basically they're these dry pods that when we fire them into the ground, they swell up just like this, and they preferentially hold water on that seed instead of on the surrounding environment. So it's giving it that water when there's that drought, when there's that heat dome. And this is such an important piece for us. We can't just depend on the climate being better. We got to expect the worst And so we're trying to design a solution that's prepared for the worst. So this is a little bit more on the pods again. It's over 480,000 now a day, about 500,000. And then you've seen the picture of our drones. I'll show you a video here, but we actually have been able to reliably fire them from the drone and not drop. We fire them 15 a second and can embed them in the soil. So let's see if this works. Fingers crossed. So this is just kind of what field ops look like for us now. So these are burns that were happening in the Okanagan. This is what a site looks like, scorched earth. We had a very large team, multiple trailers. We had 16 staff out there. These are the drones. The drones are almost 14 feet diameter, the biggest commercially available drones in the world. And no more paintball guns, you can see. These drones. Now we're basically able to plant in any of the burns that happen in Canada. So this was us planting within, I think, 8 months of the wildfires that took over the Okanagan. No other companies can come back and plant that fast because you need 2 years to grow the seedlings. There it is, the pods embedding. And so yeah, this is just a little bit of a look, guys, how it is in the field. Also, we have drone swarms. You can see 6 drones there. We're now able to fly multiple drones. They have different paths. And so they're out doing the heavy lifting all day. So we don't have to, again, do the backbreaking work of planting them by hand. Okay. Okay. These are some of the partners that we've now been able to work with. So we got some very high profile businesses that we work with to plant trees collectively. So we've done some of the market validation now, and they're helping us plant millions of trees across Canada in 2024. Again, recognition and press. This is great. It was definitely encouraging for us to see all the recognition we're getting as a business, but don't use this as validation. The validation really comes down to your product, how it's performing in the field. You got to be focused on that and not get distracted by, the accolades. While the accolades are great and relish them, don't let it be a distraction. Don't consider that a win. This is a little more traction. So these are some of the things that we've been able to kind of just develop as a business. But I think here's a good spot for me to just kind of wrap it up, and I'll recap kind of the main messages. So thinking about an innovation. You're going to work in climate change, you're going to work in SaaS, you're going to work in ag, any field. There's some common threads with an innovation. One is it needs to resolve a pain point. It needs to address something that's a pain somewhere. It needs to have significant upside potential. And it must disrupt. If you're not annoying anyone, if there's no tension with an existing industry, you're not doing anything innovative. So you should be expecting there to be pushback. You should be expecting it to ruffle feathers. That's validation that you have an innovation and it has the potential to disrupt. So recognizing that, does anyone consider a square tire an innovation? It's new. It's not used. I've never seen it. So it's new development. I would wager no. I would not. I would not wager that's an innovation for these reasons. Is a square tire really resolving a pain point? Is it really making anything better? Probably not. Does it have a lot of upside potential? It doesn't really look to me like it's scalable. Yeah, sure, it's new. Could be an invention, but not one that I would consider an innovation. And is that going to disrupt? Is that really going to be upsetting the Elon Musks or the Henry Fords of the world? I don't think so. And then for your innovation, just remember, failure is a better teacher than success. It truly is. And we've learned this the hard way. What we thought was us contributing to success in the field was very often factors that were not ours. And we only learned that through failure. Because we tried to replicate everything. Everything we did the same, but it turned out different. And so it was through those failures we realized, oh shoot, this is actually what we need to do to control the performance of the field. Failure is always a better teacher than success. Remember, no decision is in itself a decision. So if you're humming and hawing, you're basically making a decision not to do it. And if that is your decision, far be it from me to say that it shouldn't be, but you've got to recognize that you're making a decision not to do it. And there is no success without risk. And lastly, this point that I've drilled in so much, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So that's it for me. I'd love to open it up for questions and hear from you.